Hi, this is Ahmed Hassan Saeed. I am a senior developer at AlphaBoard. Today I am going to demonstrate you an IoT use case of telemetry streaming from machines to your cloud applications with the help of WebSockets. I am going to use Socket.io, a Verity-owned open source abstraction of WebSockets. You will learn to set up a Socket.io node server, a React front-end client to plot the telemetries, and a machine-side script which will act as a telemetry emitting socket client as well. If you want to learn setting up the machine-side interface, then hop on to the attached link. Let's dive in. Alright, I created a root folder which is known as telemetry app. Then I did yon init -y that basically creates a package.json, and -y typically do yes to all the questions that you get to ask during its setup. Then I use npx to create a new React project in a folder called client. Basically, I structured it in a way that the root directory will serve as a backend, a socket server, and then we have a folder called client that's going to be our React application. Alright, then I open a new bash tab. I went into the client folder, installed Socket.io client, and came back to the root folder and installed Socket.io and Express, which will handle the server-side connection part of it. And from client-side application, you basically want to connect to Socket.io server, so you have to install Socket.io client. Alright, then in the root directory, I created a file server.js and do go dot to open up Visual Studio Code. Alright, now we are in Visual Studio Code. So we go into the server.js and require the Express, HTTP, Socket.io, and actually create a socket server. Now what we have to do is on io.on, every connection we have to emit back an ID for the socket client. And then on line number 17, what we need to do is we need to actually listen for an event that's going to be invoked by our machine side interface, and it's going to invoke an event known as send telemetry, and it's going to send us a body which will contain the telemetries. And then what we need to do is we are not going to do socket.emit here because we are not emitting to a specific socket, but we are doing instead io.emit. So that means we are emitting the received telemetries to every client who is actually listening for that specific event, which is telemetry. Finally, we make the server to listen on port 8000, and that is it on the server side. Now let's dive into the client side setup. So in the client side, I go into the client folder, open up source, and go into my application, which is app.js. So in this, I import React, I import Socket.io client, and I import some line charts from React charts so that I can plot it on the front end. So typically the application is the same minimalistic React application in which we basically need to use effect and we need to connect to the Socket.io server. Interestingly, one thing that you see here is that we are actually socket referencing, but we are not giving any specific URL here. Instead, we are doing a / which is gonna make it connect to the root. So let me give you the details about this hack. So if I take you to package.json, you see I have added a proxy here in my package.json. So in the proxy, I have provided the URL so that every time the client needs to connect to the socket server, it's not going to have to look right. You don't have to explicitly write about the server here. What you have to do is you can actually source it from the package.json. Alright, moving on from the socket reference that we just connected with the server, we can actually listen for that specific event which you know already that we emitted in the socket server. So on the ID, I'm going to be setting the state for the ID, and on the telemetries that the socket is emitting, which is being invoked by the machine side interface, it's going to receive the telemetries and it's going to actually build the telemetry array. So once we have the telemetry array, we are going to return our rendered application to the front end, in which we have some divs, a heading, and we have a line chart embedded in here. Not a lot of hacky stuff here, but a straightforward. You have to provide the data source, you have to provide the data keys, and you're good to go. Alright, so now you can see that in the final part I have actually run the application, started the React app, and also started the server. So now the server is actually listening for that event which the machine interface is sending, and it's plotting the live telemetry plot at the bottom, as you can see. So in this way we can actually stream telemetries directly from the machine to our any front-end application. So the concept is very ideal for a scenario where on the shop floors you have to actually measure temperatures, humidity, anything, and you need that information to control different elements of the production somewhere else, or you want that data so that you can make wise decisions on top of those.